What?
And welcome back to Game Escape, here today to review one of my all-time favorite wrestling games, WCW vs. NWO Revenge for the Nintendo 64. This game came out in 1998, and it was the sequel to WCW vs. NWO World Tour, which I reviewed about 2 months ago here on the channel, and that was a revolutionary wrestling game for many reasons, not the least of which is that you finally had a 3D wrestling game that got the controls and the presentation right. And what WCW vs. NWO Revenge does is refine those aspects, particularly the presentation. I mean, for the first time, you actually had, real arenas, real pay-per-view events. The roster in this game was absolutely tremendous. You had you had 63 wrestlers from WCW and NWO, and that was unheard of outside of something like Fire Pro Wrestling. They had all the different factions and many of the just extremely popular wrestlers. I mean, 1998 was arguably the time during which WCW started to take a downturn that would eventually destroy the company, but this is almost more of a representation of the high point of the promotion in 1997 when they were getting, really that influx of talent from WWE, and so just to have a 3D roster of all of these stars was tremendous. The gameplay was really, really slick. It hadn't changed, the control scheme hadn't changed much from WCW versus NWO World Tour. You still had the strong, medium, and weak grapple systems, which I really think were the best ways of conveying a wrestling match in a video game. I mean, it just allowed you, it just felt very, very natural, and they continue that here. It's plays a little bit faster, but more or less it is the same. What I think has been improved upon, and certainly what was surprising and jaw-dropping to me as a kid, was the replay system, where if you hit a big move in a match, you would actually get a quick, 3-cut replay of that, which just looked really, really cool for the time. And then, of course, finishing moves had sort of longer, more dramatic replays. So whatever move you used to finish your opponent, you'd sort of get this nice replay package from multiple angles. The mode that I think really was special in this game and made it certainly one of the greatest multiplayer wrestling games, but I think also one of the greatest multiplayer games, period, on the N64, was the Battle Royal mode. And here, you can have a 4-man in-ring Battle Royal with 3 other players in your living room. But you could actually, unlike World Tour, it wasn't just sort of a 4 corners match. You could actually select up to 40 wrestlers to compete, set them in a random order, and just kind of explore the roster. Now, this was not a WWF-style Battle Royal, where you just throw the guy over the top and he's eliminated. I mean, this was a match, so you had to win by pinfall, submission, or knockout, and this still retained that Japanese-style knockout system. And as a result, your matches, a 40-player Battle Royal match, could take an hour or more, and I certainly spent many an afternoon in the summer with buddies playing this mode. Just absolutely tremendous. And it would rank you. How many eliminations did you get? With the character. It really, really was so much fun. I think the other aspect of this game that makes it that certainly made it new and enjoyable and fun during its time But that I think also gives it lasting appeal is that this was one of the first wrestling games in 3D to allow you to play as the classic stars of the 80s. I mean, they had all come into, not all of them, but many of them had come into WCW at that time. But in my review of World Tour, I talked about how that was really the first good wrestling game. Growing up as a fan of wrestling in the late 80s and early 90s, you really couldn't replicate that in a game. Think back to the WWF WrestleMania on the NES, which I loved at the time, and it's a very nostalgic game for me, but ultimately it's not a very, very good wrestling game. It's just not a good game at all. Move into the early to mid-90s with the acclaimed wrestling games on the SNES and the Genesis. Those were just pure button mashers. I mean, there was nothing to them except for the fact that later on in that series you could do finishing moves. So, this was the first time that you could play as classic Hulk Hogan in a good 3D wrestling game, and you can switch the costumes, so you can have like classic Hogan versus classic Macho Man. I mean, this game has a lot of the people from the 80s. You've got Bret the Hitman Hart, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, Kurt Hennig, Mr. Perfect at the time, Roddy Piper. So it was really a revelation to be able to play as all those guys, plus all the new WCW superstars at the time. It's just a fond memory to go back and enjoy this game and try to get the most dramatic knockouts and the best replays, and you could use weapons so it didn't have that hardcore element. It's a very, very cheap game now. Loose, you're looking at around $4 to $8. Complete, you're still under $20, and it is a tremendous deal if you have any interest in pro wrestling, or if you have any interest in the WCW promotion. Of course, probably if you have an interest in the WCW promotion, you've picked up this game already. But if you're looking for a great multiplayer game on the N64, give this game a shot. It is just a lot of fun. I still play it today on occasion with friends that are into wrestling. It is just a fabulous effort, and really a labor of love to fans of pro wrestling at that time. So I thank you as always for watching Game Escape, and I will be back shortly with a new video.